I grew up in Northern Ireland and was born in 1959 in the Root Hospital in Ballymoney, which was quite a nice little place apparently. I don't remember much about it myself. Prior to my existence, I think I did cause a bit of trauma before I arrived on this planet. As it back in Ireland in 1959 in this very small little village called McCoskin, which is where my mum lived, with her 2 brothers and 1 sister, in a small, down the long lane they used to call it, in a little farmhouse sort of thing, and my granda worked at a local quarry. I think that did cause a disruption for the simple fact my mother was a little bit silly and managed to get herself caught pregnant basically, with child, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, it did bring a lot of shame on the family, and I think if you think back to 1959, it is a while ago, and then you think to Ireland and you put yourself back in the century that we're in now, the 21st century, abortion is still illegal. So, you know, even an unwanted pregnancy in those days, they were all shipped off to England. But we went of the Catholic faith, so therefore that never really happened. But my grandmother, who I loved to bits, was really quite a strong, stern woman, and thought, well, my mother brought this shame on the family, and she just basically said, you make your bed, you lie in it, and basically made her get married. Now, my mother only being 19, the legal age to get married back then was actually 21, so your parents had to agree. So my granddad had to sign for my mother to get married and give his consent. And he always, till his dying day, rued the day that he'd done that, but that's another story. So little Estelle popped along on the 26th of May 1959, and she was well accepted, and by all accounts she was a pretty good little baby, and I don't remember a great deal about that. And just after that, I think it was about 1960, something like that, my grandmother, obviously they didn't own their own house, so she thought she was Hyacinth Bouquet, the Queen Mother, whatever you'd want to call it, because she was on the council list and basically got offered 402 Ballyness Park. And any sort of memories I have as a child and any happy memories all tended to be around that particular house. And, you know, it was the centre of that little environment that lived around there, really. So here we are, she moves into 402 Ballyness Park. And, you know, she had sort of a nice, it was the end one, and she had a nice big garden. And my granddad put a vegetable plot at the side, and he had always had a beautiful garden, and at one point, much later on in life, they did actually win a Garden of the Year award. But he was very proud of his garden, and he was a hard-working man, and he used to ride a push bike to work every day and ride it home. And as a child, I can remember waiting at the top, you know, at the gate. He was never allowed outside the gate because harm would come to you if you went outside that gate, apparently. Or the bogeyman would run off you and all this rubbish. You were brought up totally petrified of everything. And he'd come in and he'd wash his hands, sit down, and she never ever called him his name, which was Frank. She only ever called him Daddy. All I ever remember is him calling him Daddy, but obviously to me he was my granda, not my daddy. And he'd have his dinner and then he'd say to me, come on Flossie, where are you going? And we'd maybe go outside and I'd wander around the garden with him, and he'd do a bit of pottering or cutting grass or whatever you done, and depending on the weather really. And if you think that man got on that bike 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and he come back in at that time of night, and then he went out there for a couple of hours, you know, he did work very hard. And we used to go on lots of little jaunts, especially on a Sunday. I mean, in Ireland on a Sunday back then, everything's shut. You know, you went to church, Sunday school, you come home, you were dressed in your Sunday best. You weren't allowed to move, you weren't allowed to play outside, you weren't allowed to get dirty. You basically got dressed and got in the car, headed to Ballyness Park, picked May and Frank up, or Mummy and Daddy as my mum used to call them, and off we'd go for a jaunt into the countryside. And my grandmother always had a flask and sandwiches, and we always had lemonade, which seemed such a luxury, with not a screw top, it was like a pop cork from the Maine man, and Maine as in Maine, the supplier of the lemonade. And he used to come round once a week. It was basically like the milkman, but he just sold lemonade. and you had to return the bottles and everything to him because obviously you got money back. So she used to get a crate of cream soda and limeade, I think, and orangeade, because they were what everyone, and it was such a luxury to have this. And we would take a bottle of that. She would always have shortbread and biscuits and cake that she made. And me in Ireland doesn't have the best of weather, but when you're a child you don't really notice any of that. And we'd go to some beautiful countryside, or it does have beautiful coastline, and we'd go there and we'd be sitting basically most of the time in the car, because as they say, you'd be foundered if you got out of the car. By foundered they mean you'd be frozen stiff, or it'd always be blowing a hoolie. So they were sort of the jaunts that you'd have. And then, you know, life would carry on and you went to school, and I don't have... a lot of people say to me, my friends now, I remember my first day at school. Well, I actually don't remember my first day at school. But I do remember my brother's first day at school when he was standing in the line behind me. And I'd been there sort of, so he's 3 years younger than me, so I was in P3 and he was going into P1. And he was standing in the line, and it was dinner time, you know, for our dinner. And he'd stood out of line, and he kept getting out of line, and he kept getting told to get back in line and to line up straight, and I pretending that I didn't know who he was, because you never would own up to your brother being there and misbehaving. And they said to him, "What is your name, little boy?" And he said, "It's Ewell Samuel John Francis Kennedy." And it always just sticks in my memory, because I thought what a mouthful that was, really. Fancy giving a child that name. And I'd done something similar with my own son, because I gave him Ryan Francis Marsden Edwards, so there you go. I must have forgotten that at a weak moment in 1989 when he was born many years later. And then we have Kay, my mum's youngest sister, and she's actually only 13 years older than me. So she was like my big sister, really. And she used to look after me a lot. And her husband, that she ended up marrying much later on, I was about 14, I was their bridesmaid, Harold, he went off to Canada to work and to save up. And they bought this 6 acres of land, and they were building this house, and I can remember the footings being dug out, and they were so posh. But she was a little bit naughty, really, when he went off to Canada, because she went back to her old boyfriend. So we had lots of days out, me being too young and my brother to know that really she was sort of, Harold was off in Canada for a few years and she was going out with her ex, basically. But he was pretty good fun, and he used to have this younger brother, and he used to come out and he used to play with us, and we used to go on picnics, and we used to go to Barry's, which was an amusement park in Portrush, but this time we had the money, you see, and he used to pay, Kenny his name was, and he used to pay for us to go on all the rides. We used to get ice cream, and they were happy days, really. And I suppose they're about my childhood memories, really. The nicest memories I have were my nan and granddad, my granddad in particular. I spent an awful lot of my days with him. He was a very patient, caring, loving man. I can remember him teaching me the time, and he had the patience of Job. I can remember every time I'd have a bath and wash my hair, and I've still got frizzy, tatty hair, but in those days there was no such thing as a serum. You probably didn't even have hair conditioner. And he'd sit patiently for hours taking my hair strand by strand and combing it to get all the knots out of it. And then my mother would back comb it and put it up in a bun, so we were back to square one. It wasn't all accident, it wasn't all doom and gloom, it was all really very nice. It was all a very innocent little world that I lived in. And I left that world, and I think I broke my granddad's heart because I moved over here when I was 12. And when I moved over here I thought, oh, it was all going to be wonderful. And it was for a while, but then I got a distinct disliking for Merseyside, Liverpool, and everything to do with it. And I always said, when I'm 18, you can't stop me, and I'm going back to Ireland to live. But needless to say, by the time I was 18, I'd left school and was working and made a new life, and was quite enjoying Liverpool and the nightlife and everything that went with it. So I actually never went back to Ireland, but I do have very fond memories of it.